Hello, this is Kate. Welcome to my channel. I just wanted to pop in before I made my tutorial and say that I know that I have been absent for a while. It's been a crazy busy summer. I'm a new homeowner. I put a brand new landscape garden out in my yard and built it myself. I have a new standard poodle puppy. Her name is Boudica. She's 5 months old now, but I've spent most of the summer training her. We went on holiday, and then my 76-year-old stepmom, who's a very active person, is still undergoing, life changes that have put a lot more responsibility on me. So you know how life gets in the way. I'm sure each of you have your own responsibilities. You don't complain about them like I'm not, but they are very real disruptions sometimes to things we want to do versus the things that we have to do. So looking forward to this one. Some of you have said that you can't do Mosaic Overlay because it just looks so hard. It's not. If you know how to single crochet and double crochet, you can do this. Such an easy study from learning the basics to learning this, and there's so many directions you can go with it. It's just downright addictive. You're gonna love it. So just take that 30 minutes. I'll try to keep this video as basic and as short as possible. And we're going to start with how to read the graph, and we're going to move on to the mechanics of it. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so what you see here is a pattern that I published earlier in the year. It's the Mosaic stained glass pattern, and it's been published on Ravelry and Etsy. Now, what you'll get here on the side is the logo, and Woolly Faye, that's me. And of course it says 2022 Catherine Vaught Woolly Faye Crochet Designs. It has my email, which is woollyfaye@protonmail.com. It has a website to my WordPress and my YouTube channel. And then of course a picture of the pattern that you are constructing. When you come down on this, going down, you have the terms of the copyright. Then you have your pattern specifications. This is US terminology. There is a difference between US and UK terminology. Now, other places in the world use the same terms as the US, I think. But in the UK, they call what we call a single crochet, they call a double crochet. What we call a double, they call a treble. We have the pattern style, that's Mosaic Overlay. We have the hook size, which in this case was a 4mm or a G. The fiber weight that I used was Aran or worsted, and difficulty was easy to intermediate. Fiber content, 100% acrylic. Dimensions, 35 by 50. Now, it's a pretty small blanket, and the yardage is 800 yards of color A and 800 yards of color B for this pattern. Now, the gauge here, the 4x4 swatch, I have taken that from the back side right here where it says wrong side, right here. Okay, the materials you need, that'll be on there as well. It'll tell you exactly what you have to have and then what kind of knowledge. You want to know how to do a single crochet and a dip down double crochet. Dip down double crochet is exactly like a regular double crochet, except that you're dipping down, and we'll look at that more when we get into the mechanics of it. And of course, you need to know how to do Mosaic Overlay technique, which is why you're here. Okay, then we have the glossary of abbreviations. So if you're looking at the pattern and it says CH, that means to chain. If you're looking at the pattern and it says SC, that means a single crochet. Slip stitch, dip down double crochets, that's what you use with Mosaic Overlay. Back bump, you use that when you put your first stitches into the chain. And so all the way down, you'll be able to see what each one of these means. And then you have your graph key, and it explains that the graph is numbered from the bottom to the top. So 1 will be at the very bottom of the graph, and then it's worked or read from right to left. So you're going to be starting at the bottom and moving toward the left. Then when you start the next row, you tie off, you come back and add your yarn, and it'll be the next row up, and you'll work it from right to left. You never turn your work with Mosaic Overlay. You always fasten off at the end, and then you add on again at the other side, and you'll see that also when we work on the mechanics of it. Designer notes. I always put these on here for people who've never worked a Mosaic Overlay pattern before. I'm sure it's aggravating to people who have worked 100 of them or a dozen of them, but you can just skip right past that if you know what you're doing. But sometimes when people are new, they buy a pattern, that extra information can be very helpful for them. So I always put that in my patterns as well. Then we have the written instructions. On this one, you know, you're chaining 220. Your final stitch count after you add your first is going to be 219. And the reason for that, and remember that stitch count stays the same from the beginning to the end of a mosaic overlay pattern, but it'll be this number, final stitch count. It'll be 219 on this particular pattern. Another pattern will be different. So you will actually stick with 219 from the first row on. The reason you lose that stitch, because it says here, beginning with the second bump from the hook, and that's on your chain, okay? One single crochet into the back bump of every chain, and then you fasten off. So when you begin with the second from the hook, you lose one. You lose that first one. So you've gone from a chain of 220 to a final stitch count of 219. And then when you go row 2, color A, same color as you started with, then you're going to attach your yarn to the first stitch, and I'll show you how to do that when we do the mechanics. And then one back loop, single crochet until there is one stitch remaining on your row, okay? You're going to single crochet under both loops of that final stitch, because you're always working into the back loop. One back loop, single crochet. You're going to do that into every stitch until there is one stitch remaining on the row. So you single crochet both loops on the final stitch and fasten off. You'll do that every single time. Then on row 3, row 5, and row 7, you're going to use color B, and the instructions will remain the same for row 3, row 5, and row 7. When you get down to row 4, so you got row 3, row 4, row 5, row 6. So row 4 and 6 will be exactly the same in color A. So I've just lumped those together because there's no, I don't have to just keep repeating the same instructions over and over and over. So you're going to go to row 3 and follow these instructions. Go to row 4, follow these, 5, 6, 7. And then we're going to get down here to 8, 10, 12. Okay, so those are going to be grouped together because the instructions are exactly the same, but you're just going to have to remember to work these instructions for row 3, 5, and 7, and these instructions for row 4 and row 6. And the color A and B is specified as well. So then we come to the graph, and the graph is separate from the written instructions. Now, they're in the same PDF, but I have started recently putting the graph on a larger format because they're just so much easier to read. I didn't used to do that, so if you bought an old pattern and it's in the old format, I'm sure you've made do with that just fine, but I find that actually the graphs turn out better if I put them on a larger format, like tabloid. But what I advise you to do with these, if you're able, is to go ahead and read these digitally. It's just so much easier than to print them off, but print off your written portion. So you can have your written portion, say, right here beside you when you're working. You can look at it anytime you want, but then when you need to look at the graph, you can just blow this up full size. It's just so much easier to read. On row 1, of course, it says A. This is where we put our first single crochet stitches into the back bump of every chain. So when you're reading your graph and you get to row 1, just know that's your back bumps. And it's also written, of course, at the top of the graph too, in a little text box to tell you exactly how much your chain count should be, and of course the final stitch count, how to construct the first row. So when you're reading those instructions, know this is row 1. That's not your chain. That's your first single crochet into the chain. Okay. Now you're going to start over here with row 2. You're going to do color A again. So you will have fastened off on the left, and then you'll come back to the right and attach that same color again. You don't want to turn the work. You want to keep the integrity of the blanket the same throughout. And so you'll attach that yarn again with color A, and of course put your single crochet stitches. That is in your instructions. You get to 3, you're going to change to color B. So you fastened off color A on row 2, you come back to the right, you add color B, and it does not matter where you see these color A's, all right? Those are achieved with your dip down. So what you're seeing here is how that looks when you dip down, okay? But you will actually just do color B all the way across, so it'll look like just one solid stripe like this. Then when you get to color row 4 and you're using color A again, that's where those designs start to take shape. So what you'll do is you fasten off on row 3 with color B, you come back and you add color A to the right, and I'll show you how to do that. And then you're going to dip down where the X's are. Now remember, you've been back loop single crocheting, so every time you've worked into that back loop, you've left a front loop available. So you're going to take this row 4 and dip down into row 2, 2 rows down, and complete a double crochet into that front loop. It's right there because you've worked in the back loop. It's right there ready to use. You'll see that when we start working it. The next one, you'll do a back loop single crochet, and then on the next, you'll dip down again, 2 rows down. So it's a double crochet worked into the front loop, 2 rows down, okay? So you'll complete your whole row like that, then come up and do a back loop single crochet, and it will look solid like this. And then it will start to take shape again on row 6 when you continue to do your dip down double crochet. Now the confusion for some people can be that when they read these, they wonder why there's not an X here. You're dipping down from here to here. Why is there no X here? Well, you are working back loops here, okay? So you're not actually working dip downs on this row or this one, okay? The dip downs come up here. So you'll only see an X where you actually dip down. And that's what's going to make your color pathways. You'll understand this more as we get to adding the mechanics, okay, of it. But that's basically, here it's all back loop. Here it's all back loop, see? And then when you get up here, again, look at these little squares where the color is in the middle. We're dipping down 2 rows down, okay? So that's how you read the graph. Now what we're going to do at this point is we're going to actually pick up a different pattern, and I'm just going to walk you through how each step of this works. So in this portion of the tutorial, we're only going to learn how to set up and the basic mechanics of Mosaic Overlay. So it doesn't matter what size yarn you use. You can use any spare yarn you have and any hook size you have. It's not important for this stage. When I get to the pattern I'm working on, you will probably just get a demonstration of how it works in a pattern. So we're going to really be putting a lot of attention into the setup here. I also want to mention that I have psoriasis. It's because I've been ill. I have a pretty good little breakout, so I may go ahead and put this into comic mode, but I'm going to be real sure and try that to make sure that you actually can see everything that's going on. So I'm going to do my slip knot. You do yours however you prefer, okay? And then you're going to chain 13 because we're not going to need to do a long chain for this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And don't forget to use that pause button if you need to catch up. Okay, you can always hit pause and play again when you're ready. So you're going to turn your work over. This chain that you've just created should have a ridge on it, and there should be a lot of little bumps on the back there. Maybe you could see one here and then one here. And so you are going to slide your hook up under the second one from the hook. And that's going to be right here. So you've got one that's kind of buried up right here next to the loop. You're going to skip that chain entirely. Go to the second back bump from the hook and do a single crochet stitch. So slide my hook up under the second one now. Get that. And I will tell you, this is my least favorite part of creating a crochet project, is doing the chain and the initial stitches. And then after that, I just love every minute. So if you find this tedious, just remember when you get past this, it's a lot nicer. So go ahead and go all the way down to the end. You should only have 12 stitches when you're done, because we skipped that first stitch. And stop when you get to the final stitch, and I will show you how to fasten off. Okay, so I have put one single crochet stitch into the back bump of every chain. I have a total of 12 stitches, because remember, we skipped that first stitch. We started with the second chain from the hook. So now I want to fasten off, and I'm going to chain 2, 1, 2. After I've chained 2, I just kind of stretch my fingers out there like that. I clip that off. I take my hook and I just come straight up until it releases it. And then I slide my fingers down. Those 2 chains now form a knot. That knot is very tight. I have to clip mine. They're so snug that I have to clip mine if I have to end up frogging it. So the best thing to do, because that can be frustrating, is to make sure before you fasten off that all of your work is correct. So just take a minute to inspect it. Okay, so the important thing to remember on this is that when we fasten off, we do not turn the work. We leave it on the same side throughout the project from the beginning to the end. What we do instead is we come back over to the right side. We put our hook under both loops of the first stitch, and that's where we add our yarn. So in my patterns, every row begins with attach yarn first stitch. That may be color A or color B. It would depend basically on, because you're alternating what your last color was in most cases. So what we've done here, we've used color A to put our first single crochet into the back bump of every stitch. And now we're going to use color B. So we're going to place color B against the back and pin it with our hands. And then we're going to pull up a loop. We're going to then chain 1. We're then going to put our finger on the top of that yarn, that loop that's on our hook. We're going to insert the hook back into the very same stitch, both loops. We're going to pull up another loop, and then we're going to complete a single crochet. I then give that tail a little bit of a tug to make sure that the stitch isn't sloppy or loose. On this row, we're just going to work one single crochet all the way across from the right side to the left, and of course we're going to fasten off after we complete the last stitch under both loops. Now it's important that I'm stressing both loops on the first and the last, because in Mosaic Overlay you always work back loop only, or if you're doing a dip down, front loop. So the first and the last stitches are the exception to the rule. In this case, you always work under both loops, but never anywhere else. You're always going into the back loop except for the first and the last stitch. So we go into the back loop. Here's the front loop of our stitch. We don't touch it, we leave that alone. We go into the back loop behind it, pull up a loop and complete a single crochet. And we're going to do a back loop single crochet on every stitch on the row. That will show up on your pattern as BL space SC, back loop single crochet. And we're doing that all the way to the final stitch. Now, we got to the final stitch. Once again, as I have stressed, we go under both loops, and then we pull up a loop and complete a single crochet. And now once again, we're going to fasten off. To fasten off, you're going to chain 2. You're going to take your clippers, stretch that out, clip it off. Be sure not to clip your finger. Did that once. You're going to pull the crochet hook up until it releases that tail, and then you're going to pull the tail this way and slide your fingers down the other way to create that knot. Always be sure and check your work to be sure that you haven't made any errors before you fasten off. Now, we don't turn the work, as I've already stated. We go back to the right hand side and we put our hook under both loops of the first stitch. Now we're going to switch this up a bit just to see how we create color pathways, and we're using our overlay technique to do this. So I pin the new color to the back. This is color A. I pull the yarn through, pull up a loop, I chain one, I then put my finger on the top of that loop on the hook, insert my hook back into the same stitch under both loops again, I pull up another loop, and then I complete a single crochet. Then I give that tail a little bit of a tug to make sure that the work is tidy. Now what I want to do is I want to dip down on the next stitch. So this is your dip down double crochet. You remember that I told you it's so easy that all you have to know is single crochet and double crochet. Remember that we worked into the back loop on the last row, so we left the front loop available. So what you want to do is all double crochet. You're going to wrap once, you're going to come down, skip this row, go down to the one below it, 2 rows down, pick up that front loop, and then complete your double crochet stitch. So on the next one, let's do a back loop single crochet. Okay, pull up a loop and complete a single crochet. Then we're going to do another dip down. Now here's where our back loop single crochet was. We're going to do a dip down double crochet. That's a regular double crochet in the front loop, 2 rows down. So we dip down. You're going to wrap it. You're going to go into the stitch directly below on the same column of your graph and complete that double crochet. Now do a back loop single crochet into the next stitch. Leave the front one alone, go into the back and complete a single crochet. Quite simple. And then we're going to do a double crochet, 2 rows down into the front loop of the next stitch. So you should always, in this case, what we're doing right now, you should be able to see the stitch where you did the back loop single crochet. You should be able to see that front loop still there, and then the next one should be a dip down where you've actually worked into the front loop. So let's do the next one, a dip down double crochet. We wrap, we pick up the stitch, the front loop of that stitch, and we complete a double crochet stitch. And then let's do a back loop. So let's go ahead and alternate all the way down. And you can see, if you can remember, how to fasten off on your own. Of course, I will do it with you. Go into the back loop of the next one. And then we're going to dip down on the one after. Oh. And the back loop of the next one. And then on the final stitch, we go under both loops, complete a single crochet, and then we chain 2 and clip that off. And then we're going to cinch it down by pulling in 2 different directions. Okay, so we're going to now do a dip down into all the spaces we left in a back loop over all the white. So see if you can add this again. Of course, I'm going to do it with you, but see if you can remember how to do it on your own. We're going to pin that to the back first. We're going to pull up the loop. We're going to chain 1. Put your finger on the loop. Go up under both loops. Again, pull up a second loop and complete a single crochet stitch. Now, the next one, we're going to do a back loop, single crochet. And the next one, we're going to do a dip down. So we're going to pick up that front loop where we did the back loop. See, we left a front loop available, and complete a dip down double crochet stitch. Now go into the back loop of the next one and complete a single crochet. And then in the one after, wrap, go down, pick up that front loop, and complete a double crochet stitch. And do that all the way down, and see if you can fasten off on your own. More time here, picking up that front loop. And now we're going to work under both loops to fasten off. Okay, chain 2. All right. And you could continue to do that, or any number of designs. That's what the patterns are for. So now what I want to do is apply all this to a work in progress. So just like before, we're going to add our new color. And I'm trying really hard not to get off camera here. Hopefully I won't. We're going to add the new color the same way we did before. You get used to this. It happens really fast. And then the next stitch would be a back loop. And there's no pattern for me to show you because I don't, like I said, want to reveal it yet. But I just want you to see how all of this comes together. Okay, so dip down and back loop. So as you can see, we're just doing one dip down, one back loop like I showed you in the other. And of course, that's not how the whole pattern will go. It's got some really cool stuff in it. It's called duality. But in this portion of it, we do a lot of alternating back and forth with these. So I've got a back loop and a dip down. And a back loop. And a dip down. And a back loop. Dip down. Whoop. Dip down. Okay. So I've been alternating dip down and back loop, single crochet, and dip downs, and now I have come to the end of this section, and suddenly on the pattern it will tell you to do 3 back loop single crochets and then a final dip down. Now in this particular pattern, I will now do back loop single crochets all the way across until I get to the other side. So there's really no point in having you sit and watch me do back loop single crochets all the way across. But this is basically the essence of Mosaic Overlay. It's a combination of back loop single crochets and dip down double crochets that form color pathways or designs. Also, I wanted to just give myself a plug. If you go to my Etsy or Ravelry store and you purchase a pattern, you can get 10% off of your order by using code HOLIDAYPROMO22, all in caps. So I hope this has helped you. And if you have any questions for me in the future, again, use that email on the patterns. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. We'll see you the next time.